Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to all our viewers. We'd like to thank you for joining us on the next episode of Hackenbroch's Helpful Half Hour. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by our esteemed member, somebody who is very much in demand at the moment as we discuss tonight your pets. And we are delighted to welcome Dr. Andrew Monchar of 2x2. Veterinary, what's the last word? I can't see on the screen.
Center, but it's gone off the screen.
Okay, center. So we are delighted. Andrew, good evening and welcome. How are you?
Good evening, Rabbi. Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Delighted.
You're an absolute pleasure. Your reputation goes before you, and I know that you are exceptionally busy, and we're going to come to that in a minute. It's very apropos that we should have a vet visiting our program tonight, because after the rain of the last 24 hours, many have said it's been raining cats and dogs. Boom, boom. So first we have to get the many people have submitted terrible jokes about pets that I meant to read out. So I'm just going to share with you one. The author, his initials are DR. I'm not going to say any more. So an old lady goes to the vet and she asks the vet to look at her ill hamster. You know this one, Andrew?
No, but I'm sure I've seen the ill hamster.
Okay. He tells her that a hamster has very sadly passed away. She's very upset with the verdict, and she asks for a second opinion. He whistles, and all of a sudden, a black Labrador walks in, sniffs the hamster, and shakes his head. Still very upset, she asks for a third opinion and whistles. All of a sudden, a cat walks in, sniffs the hamster, shakes his head, and says, no. So she accepts the decision and asks for the bill. And she is shocked and queries the amount. It's ridiculous. So she gets a bill for what, £250. And she says, that is outrageous. Can you give me a breakdown for why it is so much? Sure, says the vet. £50 for me, and it's £100 for the lab report, and £100 for the CAT scan. Boom, boom. Okay. The old ones are the best. Anyways, delighted.
I think that's quite good value for money.
We'll come to value for money. We're going to get our value for money. Good night. Good evening to everyone. Let's start by finding out from our vet. Andrew, tell me, listen, they say a rabbi is not a job for a nice Jewish boy. Now, I don't know many Jewish vets, okay? How did you end up becoming a vet? Tell us about it.
I just always wanted to do it. There's a photograph of me somewhere in a hotel, like a seaside resort, and I'm 3 years old. I'm about 60 centimeters tall, just hugging this enormous Labrador that seemed completely nonplussed by me climbing all over it, and I think that was the start of it. And from there, I just always wanted to do it. The whole my entire school career was centered around achieving that goal. So started young.
How long does it take for someone to qualify as a vet?
So after A-levels, it's a 5-year degree course. I did a second degree in the middle in 1 year. So you can do a science degree kind of sandwiched in the middle of the vet degree. I did veterinary conservation medicine. But for the majority of people, it's 5 years, although I did 6.
Wow. So you became a vet, okay? Yeah. I think for most of us, and I find it fascinating, being a pet lover myself. Tell us about, I know that we were discussing earlier about the post-COVID or during COVID, your day and the clients and patients that you see are very different. Pre-COVID, tell us about what came across your surgery. Take me through when your day starts, when it finishes, what it looked like pre-COVID and what it looks like today.
So I guess it's important to say that I'm a small animal vet in the middle of Finchley. So my day is a little bit different to the traditional Heriot era mixed practice where you'd do a bit of dog and cat work sandwiched between 6 a.m. on the farm seeing the cows. So I definitely don't have that broader a day. But pre-COVID, I would mainly work 9 a.m. till 7 o'clock. Weekdays, I work 10 till 2 on a Sunday, and I see dogs and cats for the majority. I get some rabbits. Rabbits are the third most popular pet in the UK. And I get a small number of parrots, other birds, chickens, poultry, that sort of thing, and then lizards, snakes, turtles, and tortoises, and the occasional amphibian.
Right.
Occasional.
Talking about do you ever get gefilte fish?
Do you know what? It's funny you say that. I have actually been called out whilst in Finchley to a pond of koi carp, and if I tell you, yeah, and if I tell you that was an interesting one to go and see, with just hundreds and hundreds of these fish that he needed help with. Yeah.
And did you know which one was the gefilte fish? The one in the pond? Did you know? It was the one with the carrot on.
You don't want to eat
one with a carrot on its head.
They're worth tens of thousands of pounds each. You don't want to eat quick off.
Wow. Fascinating. And what do you enjoy most about being a vet? Tell us what it's like.
I get a lot of job satisfaction. So I think compared to maybe some other jobs that are out there, my day-to-day is very, very broad and different. And I think actually since COVID started, it's become less diverse because, as we're going to get onto, there's obviously been a lot of puppies and kittens coming through the door since the lockdown started. But generally, it's a very diverse caseload. I get to think a lot because everything is different, and my job is basically problem solving because the pets can't talk to me. I've got to put the pieces of the jigsaw together without their direct input. So that's the thing I like the most. Okay, I think I'm still moving, but you've frozen. Okay. Okay, technical difficulties going on. Okay, I think I'm going to leave the studio and come back in. Oh, it's the rabbi that's gone. Okay. Thank you, Estelle and Michelle. Thanks for confirming that I'm still in the room. I suppose I can see comments coming through. So if people want to ask questions, I guess now's as good a time as any. I can answer questions coming through from Facebook. So Estelle, my surgery is based in Long Lane in Finchley Central, N3. So we're at near the crossroads of Squires Lane and Long Lane. Okay. So Woodside Park, Shul, what is the most exotic pet you've ever treated? I have treated, at the Finchley Clinic, I've treated plenty of parrots and macaws. I've treated lizards. I've had one skunk come in. On a general basis, I've worked in zoos, so elephants, rhinos, anything you can think of, really. My first ever autopsy was on a Siberian tiger before I ever did dogs and cats. So yeah, I've done all sorts of exotic work. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just log out and see if that'll allow the rabbi to come back in. Hang on.
Hello, Andrew. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Andrea. Hi.
Hi. The rabbi's internet's gone down, everyone, so we're really sorry, and he's struggling to get back in. So whilst he's gone, because we don't want to see my face and we want to hear from you, so I've got some of the questions here. Well, I think the rabbi is coming back in. So what I was going to ask you is, when should I take my new pet to the vet, and what can I expect?
So if it's a new puppy or kitten, I usually like them to stay with you for 24, 48 hours. The reason is if you rush straight to the vet to have a health check, I'm going to ask you, is your puppy eating? Is your kitten pooping and peeing fine? Have we got any diarrhea or vomiting? And you're going to say, I don't know, I've just brought it home from the breeder, and we've just done a car journey. So I would tend to say give it 24 to 48 hours, and delighted to see you and do a health check.
Okay, so it gives you a better idea. But the rabbi's back, so I will leave you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea.
Okay, we got a virus. I think it was from one of your pets. So I'm hoping you can cure us. I'm sorry about that. Internet was down. Nothing we can do. So we move on. Let's move on to the actual questions before I get knocked off again. Apologies, everyone. First question we have. When should I take my new pet to the vet, and what can I expect?
So Andrea's just asked that one.
Okay.
But I didn't really say what to expect. So the second half of the question, generally a vet will do a full health exam, physical exam. They'll weigh your pet, check and see if there's a microchip present. In dogs, it's law that you have to have the microchip from 8 weeks old and registered on a DEFRA approved database. There are more than several out there that comply with that. And if you haven't had it done by 8 weeks and there's no chip to be found, then the vet can make sure your pet is compliant. Cats, that's not yet law, but it is currently being discussed in Parliament right now. So there will be something coming for cat ownership in probably the next 12 months or so. But at the moment, if you don't have one, then it's suggested, but it's not a mandatory legal requirement.
Right. As many of us are looking forward, Andrew, please God, to a summer and a summer holiday. I know that's being optimistic. What would you say to the pet owners about the top hazards to watch out for in order to protect their pets over the summer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, for example, cats, if you've got white cats or maybe a black cat with white face, they're really, really prone to sunburn. So they spend all day sat on your patio or in the garden, soaking up the rays, and actually over time that can, just like us, can cause skin cancer. So one of the things that I would suggest all owners of white cats to do is actually to put sunblock on the tips of the ears, the nose as well, at least once a day in the current sunny weather. The other big thing that we see in the summer, obviously, is burns on the paws, especially for dogs. So if it's one of those days where it's 30 degrees, 32 degrees, it gets very hot on the tarmac. I would suggest not walking dogs in the heat of the day. Probably in the hot days, anything after 10 a.m. is probably too hot for them. Consider maybe even buying booties for them if you are planning on going out in the midday heat with them, so that they've got some protection, because their pads are just thick skin. There's nothing kind of especially protective there, and that they can get thermal burns quite easily, and we see them quite commonly.
Okay. And if, let's say, you want to stay here and do a staycation and you decide to drive somewhere, it can be quite distressing for a dog or for a cat or for any animal to be cooped up. What advice would you give to transporting or going on holiday in this country with your dog or cat?
So I think the main things that we see with stress are when you take them on flights, because they're separated in the hold of the plane. So that's kind of more of an issue that we see. I think if you're going in a car, especially with dogs, most dogs go in the car all the time to to the park or to family members' houses, or maybe not so much during COVID, but they're more used to it. Cats usually would be in a basket, and they're generally fairly happy there. With cats, I would suggest getting something like the Fellaway transport spray, or there's other sprays called Pet Remedy, which is essential oils based, that can calm them quite considerably for short journeys. But ultimately, when they've done testing on pets that are traveling by air freight, what they found is that the stress levels are really transient when they've done the blood testing to test their cortisol levels. So they spike during transport, but then literally a day later they're back to normal, and it doesn't seem like there's any really long-lasting effect by transporting the animals other than at that time. Okay,
that's very helpful, Andrew. Now, one of the things that we have noticed during this period is that, rumor has it, there's been a spike in pet theft. What's your experience, and what can we do to prevent our beloved pets from being stolen?
Well, okay, so we mentioned microchipping, so that I think is a big one. I think that there's not quite so much cat theft as dog, and that's for two reasons. One, pedigree cats tend to be kept indoors and not allowed to roam outdoors, so there's less ability for thieves to actually go and get them unless they're going to break into a house for it. With dogs, we're definitely seeing organized gangs doing this, and it's very difficult. I think microchipping has played a part in reducing the number of dogs stolen, because if they get found, they can be reunited with the owner. But ultimately, if it's gangs doing it, they're often being sold on for huge sums elsewhere. It's a dog fighting aspect as well, and often they poach small dogs and put them in the rings as bait for the fighters.
So it's not one type of dog that we have to be wary of and fear for being stolen. You're saying it's all types of dog, because they can be the bait.
Absolutely. I think that the big spike and the big rise has been in the popular pedigree dogs, especially if they're not neutered, and people will kind of innocuously come up to members of the public and ask questions like, "What's your dog's name? Isn't he so cute?" And then they're looking to see if there's if they've been neutered, because there's breeding potential. If you've got, for example, a Chihuahua or French Bulldog, which are very popular breeds at the moment, that there is potential to make big bucks by doing it, basically. So it's
right. So what you mentioned, what are the most popular dogs at the moment, and popular cats?
Yeah, so cats, I would say we're seeing quite a lot of ragdolls coming through. I mean, there's always the usual moggies that people get, but from the pedigree type cats, I'm seeing a lot of ragdolls few Siamese, but they're always in the background, the Siamese. But definitely ragdolls seem to be the one at the minute for cats. For dogs, without a shadow of a doubt, it is French bulldogs. Everybody seems to be getting French bulldogs at the moment.
What is it? What is the attraction? What's with a French bulldog?
So the interesting thing about French bulldogs, because they've been bred to have a flat face, the theory is they look like babies, and that is why people are attracted to them. So they have very big ears, they have oversized eyes for the size of the flattened face, and a broad nose, and that basically switches on the old oxytocin for people when they're looking into the face. That's the prevailing theory. The other dogs that we're seeing a lot of are crossbreeds with poodles, so cavapoos and cockapoos, and anything with poo in it basically gets snapped up at the moment if it's little and fluffy. Bichon poos, we see a lot of those as well. So little and fluffy or French bulldog. That's the
right. Right. And are people holding, I mean, we've seen during COVID that people have felt lonely and they've felt trapped at home, and therefore they've wanted some, a friend, a furry friend, and therefore they've gone out and bought themselves, usually impulsively, a dog or a cat. Are people holding on to their pets and looking after them, or is your experience that there's a huge spike in people giving up and selling on or getting rid of their dogs quickly after they've got them?
I think I'm lucky with my demographics. So I think that question will be answered differently in different parts of the country. My demographic, well, first, the demographic that has gone out and bought pets is actually predominantly young people. So people below the age of, I think, 36 have bought 59% of the puppies and kittens. That was the data I saw. So I think that these people are getting pets, and in my area tend to be keeping them as well. But I think it was the RSPCA figures that 5% of the pups and kittens that have been sourced in the last 12 months have already been either returned or shipped to the shelters to be rehomed. They reckon there's been a couple of million of each dog and cats come into the country, whether that's through import or through extra breeding to deal with the demand. So 5% of 4 to 5 million animals is actually a significant drain on the shelters that they're acting as charities effectively. So.
You mentioned about the RSPCA, and of course they run schemes, and I believe through your clinic you have such schemes. Who can access these RSPCA schemes, and you want to tell us a bit about them?
Yes, certainly. So there's private practice, which obviously my clinic is, and then there is a charity called the PDSA, which has a base in Hendon, that deal with people on severe financial constraints, and they're on benefits, and they get treatment for either nothing or very, very heavily subsidized. The RSPCA, that runs a clinic on a Tuesday morning and a Thursday afternoon through my centre, is a local branch of the RSPCA. So it's not the national branch that you would necessarily see in the news. It's a local branch for Finchley, Hendon, Golders Green area. It's got a very wide catchment area, and they deal with those pets where maybe the client has some money, a low income, rather than no income, and it stops people slipping through the gaps. The people that wouldn't be eligible necessarily for free pet care or vet care, but also wouldn't have the funds to necessarily go to the private vet, and
right.
So they have strict eligibility criteria for that, which is checked thoroughly before accessing the scheme. But it does allow people that maybe wouldn't be able to access veterinary care to access it. They do pay for it, but it's not it's nothing like as expensive as the private. It's subsidized.
Right. for us as Jews, animals and animal welfare has been at the forefront in terms of as a principle, as a mitzvah, tzar b'alei chayim, looking after animals, cruelty to animals. And it seems to be quite a difficult balance. I remember when we grew up, we had a dog which we loved, came from Battersea Dogs Home. And I remember, when she was getting older and the dilemmas that you have, about, the dog's getting on and you go to the vet and then they've got to make difficult, decisions. Do we keep the dog alive? The dog's getting on, suffering. How do you weigh up and how do you come to a decision as to when to have a pet put down on when to keep that pet alive?
So it's often a very much a two-way conversation with the owners. I've obviously got to manage their expectation, but also be an advocate for the pet, because sometimes emotion clouds the decision making for the owner. And if nobody's going to stick up for the animal that may be in significant pain or it's just not going to get better, and that would be my role. But equally, if I've got an animal where maybe it's got, for example, cancer, there is something that can be done, but the question is, should it be done, or is there the funding to be able to do it? I've got to take them through all the options, and one of the options on the table is always euthanasia, and it has to be, because it's a cornerstone of welfare. And actually, vets, when we take our oath, we have to provide emergency care for any animal that is presented. So potentially, if somebody had a zebra in Finchley and they needed emergency care and they phoned me, I would have to see it and administer emergency treatment. Now, euthanasia, it's not very nice, but euthanasia classes as emergency treatment.
Right.
If something's in a lot of pain, for example, then that is a way of putting them out of pain, and it's absolutely a cornerstone of
right.
treatment. But it's my job to present the options to those owners.
Okay.
It's their job to make a decision, and it's also my job to advocate for the welfare of the animal. If I don't think it's going to make it, and I bluntly say that I don't think it's going to make it, and they still choose to continue, then that it's a difficult conversation to have. But that, going back to what you were asking, what my day-to-day is, that is my day-to-day. And there's been other places I've worked where I've had that conversation 6 to 10 times in a working day. It gets very heavy, emotionally intense.
Yeah, no, I get that. Difficult. There's just a couple more questions. Being that we're speaking to you from Woodside Park, Shul, so obviously, Jews love to eat. In fact, if we're not eating, we're thinking about eating, we're planning what we're going to eat, we're talking about what we're going to eat, we're preparing what we're going to eat, and then we eat, and immediately we complain about what we ate, and then we prepare for the next meal. When it comes to pets, and when I visit people seem to be feeding their pets the whole day long. Have you noticed, is it something about Jews or about pet owners in general? Are we feeding our pets too much? Is it like humans that they are being overfed?
There is an obesity epidemic, actually, and I don't think it's Yidden related. Although I'm sure we contribute in a minority way, but it's definitely a nationwide phenomenon that over the last 15, 20 years, the number of pets that we classify as obese has dramatically gone up. And I was looking at the Pet Food Manufacturers Association, the PFMA website earlier, and they've actually got an entire section dedicated to obesity in pets, because it's such a prevalent issue that's in the whole dog and cat population. And I must say as well, the exotic animals are still going that way. So quite often get fat reptiles in and things like that from overfeeding.
Unbelievable. The next question we have is, we've been online for over a year now, and almost every conversation, doesn't matter where we are, what we're talking about, we have to bring in COVID. So I apologize. Can you tell us, do pets transmit coronavirus?
it is not a yes and no answer.
Okay.
So I think that in theory, yes, there have been cases of COVID found in cats, I think predominantly, an occasional dog. I believe there were some tigers discovered in America with COVID that the keeper had transmitted to them. What I don't think there's very much evidence for is transmission back across the species. And the animals that did get COVID-19 showed mild cough signs and got over it. I don't think any of them had the severe signs that humans seem to be prone to. So I think the answer is yes, it can transmit. Is it a big part of the COVID picture? I think the evidence seems to be no. I know that one of the big laboratories, a laboratory called IDEX, that we send a lot of profiles to, they've instigated a questionnaire into when we do all of our submissions. Has your animal been abroad? Has it been in contact with other animals? If so, when and where did it come from? And I think they're doing screening in the background that we don't find the answers out to for the kind of epidemiology of it. I don't believe they've really found anything significant, although there are isolated cases.
Right. And if you've got young kids, right? What are there? Give us a few options of dogs or pets that you would say are safe and very user friendly for very young kids. What would you say?
Okay, I'm going to be controversial and leave the dogs and the cats to one side. I'm
With pleasure.
I'm going to go with guinea pigs for young children.
Guinea pigs, I love it.
Pigs. Yeah, not rabbits. Rabbits bite and scratch.
Okay.
Guinea pigs will just sit there and allow them to be petted and loved.
Okay.
If you want something that's not going to bite the children, then go with them.
Okay. And you said you deal with different pets. I grew up in a bit of a menagerie. I don't know if everyone knows this, but we actually had cockatoos, white cockatoos. I don't know, and my father loved them, my mother loathed them, and they used to. The problem is as you know, that if you clip the wings of a cockatoo or any type of parrot, it grows back. And so when you're cleaning out the cage, all of a sudden in your kitchen, all of a sudden, you have this cockatoo flying towards the soup, and it could become cockatoo soup. How do you feel about people owning parrots at home? Is that, I mean, we had them outdoors in a cage, but I'm saying, is that doable, or is that you would think it's not really practical?
It is doable. I just always remember when I was a student there years ago, I saw practice with an avian specialist. There was only 2 in the country at the time, and I did about a month's work at his practice. And all he does is parrots and raptors. And he did a thesis about African grey parrots and how they require ultraviolet light. He was very eminent in his field. And he said to me, my aim in life is to stop parrots being kept as pets.
Wow.
And this is a guy that made his entire living out of fixing them. He basically said that so many of the problems that they get are because of the captivity and can't adequately be managed. In a home environment, it's very difficult. I think if you've got an aviary environment, you can do a bit more with it. But even so,
Right. So if somebody wants to to register and book an appointment, how can they come to you, Andrew? You're local, and obviously, I'm highly recommended. How can people come and bring their pets 2 by 2 to you?
So they can either go to the website and book online. There's a tab at the top that they can log into our system and book a convenient slot. They can phone. Reception will be more than delighted to assist in booking, or they can email the general inquiries line, and again the reception will be able to respond to that email or give a call back and get them booked in. We do see lots of patients in the day, so it tends to be morning surgery with a gap in the middle of the day, and then in the afternoon through to just before 7 o'clock, so 4 o'clock till 7 in the afternoon for the appointments.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Andrew, before we go, we just have to have one more terrible joke, animal pet joke, just to keep you going and moaning and groaning. You know, they tell the story about the shul that they didn't have a chazan, and Rosh Hashanah was approaching. The rabbi was pulling his hair out. They were so worried and nervous. Who's going to sing for us? And all of a sudden, the vet in the community came forward. He said to the rabbi, "This dog, don't worry. He sings like a malach. He sings like an angel. He can sing the whole of Rosh Hashanah davening. He knows the whole lot." So the vet comes forward, and they make a little wager. And he goes up on the bimah, Rosh Hashanah. They put a talus around the dog, and everyone sits and waits with bated breath. Nothing, not a note, garnished. They take the dog off in disgrace. The rabbi has to fill in. Everyone's upset and disappointed. The rabbi comes back after Yom Tov, before Yom Kippur, and he comes to the vet and he says, "What have you done to me? I put my name on this. I put my head on the line, and the dog didn't do anything, and we lost money in the bet." So the vet said to him, "Rabbi, but think about the odds we're going to get for Yom Kippur." So with that joke, that terrible joke, which I won't say who I got it from, we look forward to seeing everyone next week, please God. Andrew Monchar, Dr. Andrew Monchar, thank you so much from 2x2 Vets for joining us this evening and for everything you are doing to keep our pets, our dogs, our cats, and all the various animals that we have in our community safe and well, and looking after them. We appreciate it so much, and we wish you tremendous success in your practice. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Okay.
Take care, everyone. Good night. We'll see you next week. All the very best.